I think as a transport authority, we have to take care of both. In LTA, we take care of land transport in general. Obviously, 12% of our infrastructure is for land transport. And we can't go on infinitely building more and more roads. There's a limit to roads growth. At best, we can do about 0.1% growth of roads per year. And for really where we have no choice roads, we then go underground, which are very expensive. So that we have road constraints. So what to do? Cars keep on, we can't also allow cars to continually grow infinitely. So we have also got a system where we have a quota for cars. So before you can actually buy a car, you actually need to bid for a certificate of entitlement. And just to share with you, the current certificate of entitlement, the price of that certificate is actually cost more than the car itself. So you need to get a certificate, and then before you get a car. So owning a car in Singapore is really a luxury. It's really, in part, is due to the government's control of the growth. I mentioned in my speech earlier that the growth rate that we have allowed for previously was about 3% annually, but we found that it was growing too fast. There were a lot of complaints about congestion on the roads, and it doesn't help the population is increasing. So that figure has now gone down to 1.5, and eventually it will be 0.5, and with some political will, it might go down to 0. Okay. Now, so really, the car, we have a lot of a push to. If you can afford it, well, good luck for you. But if you're at the margin, then don't even think about it. So what do? Then we have to think about the alternative. The alternative is how best then can we get people to move around. Singapore is not very big, but we are very crowded. So we have to go for more public transport systems. And the issue now is, as our system get more and more crowded, people will then apply political pressure to the government and say, look, you asked me to switch over to public transport, but public transports are getting very crowded. So what do you want me to do? I can't afford a car, and there you have. So we have a bit of a problem now. Obviously, transport systems, as we design, it comes based on certain projections of population growth. If that projection, for whatever reasons, gets a bit out of whack, we will have a difficult problem because public transport system takes time to build up. You know, a lead time of 5 to 7 years. So we have a gap. So all those measures that I explained earlier, we are trying our best to come up with an interim solution. The interim solution is sort of multi-pronged, right? We build our infrastructure, try and optimize the use of our existing infrastructure in whatever way we can. We try to pump more trains into the system as best as we can, as fast as we can. In the meantime, we are also trying to work on our buses. Buses is one way to complement the metro. So we're using that as an interim solution. And of course, the other one we're also working on is demand measures, as I explained earlier, to find some way to actually sort of reduce the spikiness of the traffic demand, working off the shoulders of the peak hours, and try to get more people through incentives. So there's a few prongs that are working on the public transport. People say that you want to make public a choice mode, but actually it is the mode now, and they're so crowded. So I think really we are working as hard as we can, and it's a big challenge. But I think it's still a more cost-effective alternative to private cars, because private cars, at the moment, if you go on the road, hopefully during the peak hours you will not get the jam, but our electronic road pricing system will help to a certain extent. But that means you pay more. Maybe that's not good enough. We might even have to work more on the parking charges as well. So we're working a few things, and it's not an easy solution. But we have, as a government, we have to take care of both, because politically it is very difficult to say that I totally ban cars or to disallow people from using cars.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to move on now to Mr. Janayak. You have a different situation in Paris, I think, because you don't have any constraints in cars. There's I think a feeling that perhaps congestion charging is a rather Anglo-Saxon thing to do, although I'm sure in Singapore they wouldn't look at it that way. You've got no restrictions in cars. You've got a road infrastructure that's built with wide boulevards in Paris that facilitate car use. What are the barriers to your encouraging people out of their cars in Paris under these circumstances?
First, it's not exactly true that we don't have any restriction to car in Paris, because the city of Paris has decided not to have charges, but there are measures to prevent people from taking cars, in giving less space to private circulation in the street, in reducing the number of parks and so on. After saying that, first we do think that our view in RADP, it's also the view of the Transport Authority, is we don't oppose car to public transport, because we see more a way of cooperation and than opposition. Because if you take the region of Île-de-France, we have the suburbs along the suburbs not around Paris, but far away of Paris, where there are not so much population, and it would be very expensive to have public transportation in this area. So people need to have cars, and for example, the share of the public transport in the whole region is something like 35%. To go from suburb to suburb, it's 10%, whereas in the city of Paris, it's 66%. So it means that when you live in the suburbs, you need car, and afterwards you have to use public transportation. So I think we do think more in terms of related system rather than in terms of opposition. And to come back to Paris, there is a very interesting view of the local authorities. It's to tell what we need. Cars also in Paris, but let's build a different system, and that's the reason why they have launched the Autolib system, which is after Vélib, which was the fact of providing 10,000 of bicycle, very inexpensive, to provide electric cars, and we should have 3,000. The city should have 3,000 electric cars that in the street you can hire without notice, if you have a subscription. And the idea is there is public transport, and the offer is very important in Paris. And besides, there is other ways like bicycling, but also electric cars. And as we have seen with the Vélib, that people are now using bicycle instead of using metros. But we have had an increase of traffic in metro because, for example, many people didn't go out, young people in evenings, because they didn't know how to come back, because after 2 hours in the morning there was no metro, and the taxis were rare. And now with Vélib, they know how to come back. So they are taking more metro to go out and then coming back with bicycles. So I think these other means of transportation have increased the overall mobility, and it's good for public transportation. But the important thing is not to have one private car that you are not using in the center of the city very often, that is blocking space, public space, and in other way to have a car like Autolib, and specifically electric car with no pollution that can be used by more people. I think it's a way also to combine cars and private cars and public transportation, and it's not against the others.
Now, I think I'm going to come on to this in a moment with Bernard Garner talking about the kind of integration of the system that he was talking about. But I just wonder, Mr. Janac, how much do you think, how resistant do you find people are to changing mode? Because I think one of the lessons in the UK has been when the buses were deregulated, as Bernard Garner was saying, you had competition from buses. and the buses started going from peripheral housing estates right into city centre because people didn't want to get off, didn't want to change onto the metro. Do you find it's easy to get people to switch between modes in the way that you're describing?
No, it's not easy, but if you have an efficient system, means that people don't wait for half an hour bus or a train. If it's comfortable and if they have information about the disruption or the next train or the next buses, it's possible to change, but it takes time, and you never must stop doing the very strong efforts to teach and to learn and to give information to the people, because it's not natural. In one's car, you have the freedom to do what you want, and it's a strong attractiveness car. So you have to be very good in terms of offer and give always much information about taking public transportation. And also there is a point that has been addressed in Paris some years ago. It's also a social difference, because in some countries and in some cities, if you take public transportation, it means that you are not belonging to upper classes. And in Paris, there was an advertising campaign that was very popular, I think it's 10 years ago, which was ticket chic, ticket choc. I cannot translate, but it was meaning that it was very chic to take the metro. And in fact, they have spent huge amount of money to launch it, and it changed the image of metro. It was no longer it was not meaning I belong to lower classes to take the metro, but everybody now is taking metro because it's. I think it's the same thing in London, because it's seen as perfectly natural and even politically correct in terms of the environment.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to come on to Bernard Garner now. I know this isn't quite the initial question I said I was going to ask you, and I'm now going to come on. I'm going to come on to that in a moment. But I mean, it does strike me that this is, from your presentation, this is an issue that people have planned these beautifully integrated systems. In the UK now, as you said, there was bus deregulation. The bus companies no longer integrated with the metros the way they were meant to, and I know it was a big problem for some of the systems. It was a problem for the Glasgow Underground. It was a problem for the Tyne and Wear Metro. But the bus companies would say, well, hang on, people don't want to change mode. They want to get a bus all the way. Part of competing with the car clearly is getting people to change mode at some point, get on your network, when it's probably easier to stay sitting where they are. And in Newcastle, probably the road isn't terribly congested either, because it's not a fast-growing area in that way. So how do you deal with that bunch of problems?
Well, it clearly is a very difficult problem, and I just sort of reinforce the comments made by my colleague from Paris, that you need to very carefully plan the provision of interchange around not only the quality of the travel experience, but also the information provision that allows people to plan that interchange and reinforces the availability of that interchange as they make their journey. There's nothing worse than actually getting on one bus, interchanging, but then finding your second bus is not turned up or it's late or whatever. So you need that reinforcement through the journey that the complete interchange will work. But the final point that is evident in the UK at the moment, where integration of mode is most difficult, is actually in ticketing, because there are many examples outside London in UK where the ticketing regimes make or penalises you actually for transferring between two different modes. Now that's not a way of attracting people to interchange. So what we really need to do is get back to a point where the public transport network is once again seen as a network, marketed as a network, and with a retail strategy that supports that network. rather than a series of individual journeys.
Yeah, and if I could just take up with you that second point I made, it so happens I once lived briefly in Newcastle, so I feel, having lived there for 4 months, I'm a world expert in the subject. It's a relatively uncongested place, unlike some of the other places we're talking about. I know that on Merseyside, that's an issue they face. They've got a city that was built to have far more people in it. The roads are relatively empty, so it's relatively easy. If you've got a car, I know you've got quite a lot of people who don't have cars, but if you've got a car, it's not that difficult to drive in Newcastle or Sunderland. How do you challenge that? Is it even worth challenging, perhaps?
Well, certainly it's worth challenging, if only because of the environmental impacts of large numbers of cars coming into our central areas. And we challenge that by providing a high-quality alternative to the use of that private car. As I say, I do think the public transport industry can do more to sell public transport in total as an alternative to the use of the car. And I think as we plan and manage our towns and cities, then there is clearly opportunity to do more by addressing the relative attractiveness of travelling by the car vis-a-vis the public transport option. And if that makes it relatively less attractive to use your car through the pricing strategies that we talked about earlier, then that might well be a price worth paying.
Yeah, okay. Now, just got a couple more questions for our panellists up here, and I hope you're going to be thinking of questions to ask them in the brief time we're going to have after that. I'm going to come on to you now, Doctor, to say, I imagine some of the other people are going to be looking at you with some envy, because they're going to say Taipei is one of these densely packed East Asian cities. It's ideal territory for public transport. Surely you don't have a problem with the car. Surely it's the kind of place where that metros were designed to serve. What kind of issues do you have competing with the car in Taipei?
Okay, you know, Taiwan is a free society, and people can choose any kinds of transportation. Some people use the cars, and most of the people use the motorcycles, because the climate there is suitable for motorcycle, easy to reach your destination, your door-to-door service. So what we have developed is the city government thinks we have to give the people have ideas. They need to choose the best alternative for them to their destination. So, you know, from my presentation, I mentioned we don't have fare changes. The fare structure remain 16 years already. And let me tell you, also bus fares. The mayor already made announcement. No fare changes also for 16 years. So all public transportation remain the same fare structures because we want to encourage more people to use it. Besides this one, we also provide metro to bus or bus to metro have the transfer concessions. Also try to attract more people to use it. Then from my presentation, I mentioned about the ICEG card. You know, once you use that kind of card, that card can be used in the buses, also parking lots, also metros, and small berry consumptions. So it's quite convenient to use our ICEG card. And if you take that one to take our metro system, 20% off the regular price. So that's all provide all kinds of incentives to attract people to use public transportation mode. So since we compete with the private car and motorcycles, so far I think in Taipei City, it is successful now. But for the other city, for the central city, Taichung or southern city, Kaohsiung, it is not successful. Because many people use the motorcycles for door-to-door services. So once we want to compete a car, it's better provide people have such kind of incentives. If they choose public transportation, it's the better strategy for them. It means to save money and cost and time. So that's the reason my city, Taipei City, try to encourage and we provide a good quality of services and try to make every services just more than people expectations, like all stations, so clean and no graffiti and no homeless people. Just let people feel it's comfortable, and people well-suited or upper-class people, they would like to use the public transport, like our metro system. That's the way we are doing.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Now, and finally, I'm going to come on to you, Mr. Rojo Garrido. You showed us some very vivid pictures of what some of these Latin American cities are like at the moment. It so happens I've been to Panama City. I've seen the way that people go around in these ancient buses clinging onto them. It looks as if it should be relatively easy to get people off those overcrowded roads onto metros when they open. But I imagine there are all kinds of questions about how you pitch the fares and so on that change people's readiness to get off the roads and into the metro. And also, I guess people are in the habit of being on the roads. What are the issues about people transferring when you open a new metro, somewhere like Panama or somewhere like Lima, and getting people to change from the mode of transport they're used to?
Well, in our opinion, the first thing, it is necessary to have a strong transport authority, because the problem usually is there are different competences between different transport authority, the cities, the region, the national government, and in our opinion, it is very important to have a strong transport authority with capacity to planify, capacity with implementing fair policies, ticketing systems, and also to have the capacity to control the different transport modes. It is important. And in our opinion, the best way is to give a best offer transport that they had in the past. The best way to compete is have really a best option. In many cases, is the only option to save, in many cases, more than 1 hour spent in traveling from the outskirts, for instance, of Sao Paulo, that many people have to spend 2 hours and a half in the morning and 2 hours and a half in the evening. It is completely very, very bad thing for people. Also, in some cities, it is necessary to implement the restriction in private car traffic. In some cases, the transport authorities or the city council forbid to circulate 20% of the cars, depends of the last number of his car, and this is in some situations a good practice. In other cities, especially in Spain and Portugal, there are some parking restrictions. For instance, in Madrid, it's forbidden to park, depends on the different areas, more than 1 hour or 2 hours. This is also important because cars are not parking during all day, and they are places for people who have to use the cars, but only for short periods, and the citizens of this area. In our opinion, there is necessary a political generosity to give the power to a unique only transport authority, because for politicians it's difficult to give the power and also continue giving money. It is necessary to have political generosity, but is completely necessary in our opinion.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want to know if are there any questions out here on the floor? I have a couple more questions I'm going to ask before. Now there's one down here. You're very brave. You're our first person to speak from the floor today. So identify yourself and say to whom your question's directed.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Matthew Jordan Tank from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I'm very interested by the assembly in front of us, because we have obviously operators of metro systems, one of whom has open themselves up to an operator from the outside in the case of DB Regio. But I'd like to ask the other three operators, what risks really are you willing to take, not to frame the question too broadly, when you would, if you were to look at operating a system outside of your home base? I know RATP Dev has done so. What kinds of things, is it this issue of competition with cars? I think probably not. Is it more about contractual conditions and risks and balances that you would look at? Thank you.
Well, that sounds like one for you first, Mr. Janayak. What risks are you ready to take when you're
It's very difficult to understand because the situations are very different from one city to the other, from one country to the other. We have roughly two kind of operation. First operation where you have only the industrial risk, meaning that you have a contract where you take the engagement to deliver at a certain price. So you assume the risk of quality and you take the risk regarding the cost and the contractual risk, and it can be very important when it's on a long period. And the second situation where you are taking the commercial risk, meaning that you are responsible for the revenues, and so all of the problems of integration, of competition of cars are in this situation. But usually when it's a new line and it's new infrastructure, there are very few operators, and we are not among them that would be able to take this risk because it's a huge one, and it's very, very difficult to assume what's going to be the traffic in the country that you don't know for new infrastructure that by definition has no history.
Yeah, okay. Now, I think the other, you said you're addressing the three operators. I think the other one that's definitely an operator is Taipei. I mean, would you consider going outside your country, and what risks would you be prepared to take?
Oh, it's hard to make such a decision. I think language is the key part. If the same kind of language is easy, like if my company can work operate a system in mainland China, then it's very easy to communicate. So that's kind of we would try. But frankly speaking, I think to run a system like an operating company, the culture and the management side is very important. The one I showed to you so far, Taipei Metro all remains in profitable condition. There is no any subsidy from the government, and we also follow the government policy. We pay all the concessions. So a lot of people, they think it's just incredible why you can do it that way. But why we can do it? Because we have R&D center, research and development center. We fixed our electronic, malfunctioning electronic circuit board by ourselves. So we save tremendous maintenance cost and time. Besides this, we have a system we call the employee suggestion system. We have 4,800 people now in my company. I think everyone, when they work, they always think something to do. They want to do something. So I put a system we call it employee suggestion system. It means that when you perform your job, if you feel something you can make improvement, just give up a proposal, a suggestion proposal. Then when we read it, we think it's worse, then we pay you $100 or $200 immediately. Then we collect it the whole years, then we make a competition. Then we give them a certain award during the competition. If we think such kind of idea is just cost-saving improvement, then we just take the improvement immediately. So through such kind of ways, we save a lot of maintenance cost and the time, because these staff, they run the system day by day. They know where is the faulty problems and where, which part need to be improved. So that's the way we save the money. So through such kind of process, that's the reason we can make profitable and until now. But when we transfer this one to another city or another system, I doubt can we achieve it or not. Okay, so it depends upon the upper management responsibility and his philosophy. That's a very key part.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I don't know about the rest of you. My stomach's beginning to rumble, and the organisers are beginning to suggest to me that we're getting very close to the end of this session. So I think over the morning we've had some fascinating presentations looking at the challenges of increasing revenue and cutting costs, and we've been hearing here about this key competition with the car. So I think we've learnt a huge amount this first morning. We are, as we were earlier, still running a little bit late. So I think we're about to break for lunch. At that lunch, you can ask Bernard Garner his views about how you need to plan a city to make it easier to compete with cars, because that's what he wanted me to ask him about, and I didn't get to ask him about it. But we're going to reconvene for the afternoon, I think, at 2:20. So do please enjoy your lunch. Eat it efficiently, I think, would be the answer. And we look forward to seeing you again in the afternoon. Thank you to all our panellists.